Just before 7 Eastern Time. And the presentation of the trophy. There it is. That's what you're playing for. That and 120 grand, but mostly that. Beautiful crystal trophy. Don't trip and fall on that. Molly says it's deadly sharp. Deadly sharp. Look good on the mantle, though. Or you could use it to weigh down that 120 grand. Something to put on top of it so it doesn't blow away. And unfortunately, we missed an interview from Molly, but she will be back soon with chip counts. I think they did exact chip counts during the dinner break. I have some idea exactly what the chip counts are. But we know the approximate numbers. Andrew Dean at a little over 2 million, David Stefanski a little over 3 million, and Andy Kaplan at around 1 million. And not long before break was our last bust out. Brad Yaziki took home $40,000 for his 3 days worth of work. It's not a bad 3 days work. Currently, we've got a hand going down between Kaplan and Dean. Kaplan raised the small blind, Dean defended his big blind, and we've got 3 queens on board. Nope. Yes. 3 queens on board. Last time there was 3 queens and a 3 on board. Stefanski won a big pot from Dean. The river's a 9. I think it was a 9 or a 10 last time to go with the 3 queens. And Dean's going to bet it. So he's either bluffing or he's got a fairly big hand. At least a 9 in his hand. Well, it's called. And looks like Kaplan's going to win that one.
Thank you.
Kaplan called with the King 10 and won it. Nice call. Figures his opponent has to be bluffing. That his opponent wouldn't bet ace high because ace high is often going to win a showdown and only be called if you're behind. Here's his opponent either has worse than King 10 or has much, much better. He was right that his opponent had worse than King 10. Good read. Won a nice pot there. I'll get the blinds updated here for you. You're at 2040. With a 5,000 chip ante, and they have raced off the 1,000 chips while we were on dinner break. Won't be needing those anymore. You know you're really getting somewhere when the 1,000 chips are gone. You're deep in a tournament at that point. I feel like I'm deep in a tournament when the 100 chips are gone. With the blinds at 20-40, there are about 130 big blinds in play total. And a little more. With about 5.5 million total chips. And the last we knew before dinner break, a little over half of those chips were in David Stefanski's stack. Looks like he raised his small blind, and Kaplan defended his big blind. Stefanski comes out betting here, which you're usually going to do on this flop. If you were the pre-flop raiser, unless you really want to get frisky, maybe because you flopped a monster. Otherwise, you would almost always bet this. And Kaplan looks like he raised him. Sometimes you see a really gutsy 3-bet here. It really looks like a strong hand when you 3-bet, but sometimes it doesn't look believable on a queen deuce deuce board. And Stefanski decided to let it go, and Kaplan takes it down. Stefanski raising the button. And strong players will tell you when you're three-handed, you should be raising the majority of your buttons in most cases. Once in a while, you get a very aggressive player behind you, or stack sizes would dictate you do something a little differently, but you should usually be raising the majority of your buttons when you're three-handed. You've got position on everybody, and everybody else put in a blind, and you didn't. If you don't steal their blinds, they're going to steal yours until you run out of chips. And none of these players has been hyper aggressive. Often when you get this late, you see one player who's been super aggressive and not only stolen a lot of chips, but also run into hands and won some chips that way too. These players are all been pretty careful. I think some of that has to do with it's a function of the blind structure. If the structure is really good, you have long levels and lots of levels, hyper-aggressive players will all be caught at some point in the tournament and end up in trouble. So it's hard to keep the foot on the gas and get it immediately to the break when you must. Only the very best players can be very, very aggressive over 3 days and still manage to get away from trouble whenever it comes. But these three all been pretty controlled. They've been aggressive when they're playing pots, but they haven't been playing that many pots. Dean raising his button. I was curious when Stefanski put his cards in front of him like that after he looked at them as to whether that was meant that he wanted to play this pot or meant that he was ready to get rid of his cards. You almost never see somebody ready to get rid of his cards in that spot in the small blind, giving away that he doesn't have a hand to the big blind. So it looks like that was a posture that indicated he was ready to play. And I think that's a 3-bet. Kaplan thinking, please give me a big hand here. Well, he got something to think about. Nope. Something about his posture told me he wasn't going to play that one. He just had to think about it for a second. I don't think Dean loves his hand either, but he hasn't moved much. He could be thinking about a 4-bet or thinking about calling since he's on the button. He could see a flop. That's what he's going to do. So a pot brewing between the two chip leaders here. And the Queen 9-6 board, Queen 10-6 board. Nine of clubs brings in every draw just about. It doesn't bring in Jack 9 completely, but if anybody had a draw, it came in there. And Stefanski with a 3-bet and then continuing to bet out here, indicating a lot of strength. I don't think Dean can keep playing here unless he's got a big club or a big made hand. He knows this pot's getting pretty big. If he puts more chips in here, he's going to really start to damage his stack. So him putting in chips here, to me, indicates he's got a big hand or a big draw. He's got either a Jack 10, a Jack 9, a Jack Queen, a King Jack, or a big club. So the only hand that really came in there was the ace of clubs. He could have made a pair there, and that could cost him. Stefanski's been repping a hand bigger than one pair, as much money as he's put in the pot. But now that he checks the river, it's possible he had a hand like King Queen. Might not be a great spot to bluff here, so if Dean bets, and I think he knows that, I don't think very much of his bluffing range missed. There's not much of his range that was a bluff on the turn, or that didn't have a big hand on the turn, that would need to bluff now. He does bet, and he goes all in, so could have been a bluff since it was an all-in. That big bet like that, probably either the nuts are close to it or nothing. That's the advantage of position. You can go all in with nothing there and make your opponent fold, because Stefanski can't check there with a big hand. He's almost never going to check there with a hand big enough to call a bet with. It almost doesn't matter what Dean's hand is. If he's got the guts to go all in there, it almost doesn't matter what his hand is. He's going to get a fold pretty much all the time. And it was too big a bet for Stefanski to call with anything that he would have checked with. Stefanski raising his button. See everybody raising the button here. Kaplan lets it go. And Dean lets it go. Stefanski trying to get some of those chips back. We can see Molly in the background there providing updates into the chat on the Twitch here, letting us know that nobody showed any cards. That's the first button that's been folded in a while, I think. Caused Dean to raise his small blind when Kaplan folded his button. And we know Stefanski is willing to defend or 3-bet quite a bit. He is not easily pushed around. It looks like a 3-bet. Dean can't be surprised by that. A lot of aggression between those two. And Dean folds. Stefanski's 3-bet, my guess is, was fairly large since he's out of position and he's against a very wide range. No, he was in position there, so it wouldn't have been as big. I'm surprised Dean folded. He must just not want to play against Stefanski out of position in a pot that big.
That thing's toast.
Well, Stefanski's raised to 150K. Wonder if Dean had limped. That's probably what happened. Dean limped and Stefanski raised. Here Dean raises the button and Kaplan's thinking about it. He reached toward chips and stopped. That usually means he's going to fold. I don't see people reach toward chips and stop and think some more and then go back to the chips very often. Stefanski folds his button. Tired of butting heads with Dean, I guess. One of the advantages of being stubborn and playing a lot of hands is that people start to surrender to you. But Kaplan limp his small blind, or did he raise? Oh, interesting idea for the broadcast here. Almost like a heads-up display online. Look at this. This way we'll know exactly who we're talking about with these labels. I kind of like that idea. What do you guys think? I like it. Couldn't do this at a full ring, full table with all the 9 or 10 players at it, but once we get down to 3-4 handed, we could usually do this. I like the idea. Playing another big pot, went to a river between Kaplan and Dean. Kaplan puts out a sizable bet on the river. Now, there are draws that missed there. But there are some big hands, too. And whilst Kaplan has a really good read on his opponent's range, he can't value bet thin on a board like this. But you're only three-handed. If you have a hand like King Jack, you probably could value bet a little thin on a board like this. But you could also bluff here. There are a lot of draws that missed. The King Queen missed, and the Queen 9 missed, and the 9-8 missed, and the 2 Hearts missed. A lot of things didn't come in here. It's not usually a bluff, but there is definitely some percentage of the time when this will be a bluff, and Dean has to be thinking that. Looking at Kaplan's body language, Kaplan pretty casually playing with his chips and looking at Dean. With some players, that means they're bluffing because they've kind of already made their decision and they've got nothing to be nervous about. And with some players, it means that they're confident. They're comfortable enough to play with chips and look at you because they have it. They wouldn't do that if they were bluffing. You have to know your player and get a feel for what they do in those situations. We could probably go back through the broadcast and see which one of those things is true of Kaplan. Dean makes the call. It looks like Kaplan must have had it because Dean quickly threw his cards in. Didn't look very happy about it. And Kaplan had the 10. Had the heart draw and the second pair and made trips on the turn. I feel pretty good about that turn card. And Kaplan wins a nice pot, and Dean's stack is being eroded a little bit here. He did win that big pot from Stefanski, but he's lost some as well, and lost that big one to Kaplan. That was a sizable river bet. So that river bet was $300,000, and he got paid. A nice addition to his stack. Just that bet was as much as he came into the day with, just about. Alright, current chip counts. Dean has 1.5 million, down from a peak of about 2.8 million, so his stack's been almost cut in half in the past hour and a half of play. And Molly's getting us chip counts here. Seeing another flop. Kaplan back on his phone. I'll be curious to hear from him afterwards if he was watching the Twitch feed or any of the commentary happening in the Twitch. So there's a win for Dean. Much needed after his stack had dropped almost in half. Back to our chip counts from Molly. We got David Stefanski started that hand with a little over 2 million. So he'll be a little below 2 million now. That'll put Dean and Stefanski at close. Stefanski will just barely have him out chipped. And Kaplan at 1.9 million. These guys are as close as it's going to get. Each of these stacks is within 15% of the two others. It's close. So basically a fresh start. Here's Molly.
Hey Chris, I just wanted to check in and respond to the question about if he is watching the Twitch stream. And Kaplan, I did have an interview with him over the break, and sorry that y'all missed that. That was a little bit of a glitch on that part. But he did tell me during that break that he actually learned poker from Bernard Lee, and basically Bernard is watching the Twitch, and so I know that they've kind of been texting back and forth, and then he also has been checking in on our Twitch stream as well, so he is in fact watching.
Thanks, Molly. And I did see that Bernard Lee commented on the Twitch stream a couple times. I've talked to a few people who've spent time either as students or just going golfing and things with Bernard Lee, who say he's a really good guy. I don't think I've ever met him. There's a lot of people I've played with that I don't remember, but he gets good reviews from people who have been students of his. And as we can see, one of his students is here. Final 3 made 50,000, and Bernard's on helping him out, watching the Twitch stream and texting him in between hands. That's a valuable thing to have a serious pro in your corner watching the Twitch stream and helping you out with tips on your opponents. He's probably picking up things that very few other people would. Got a board full of rags here mostly. We've seen a river. Checked by Kaplan, and Dean is thinking. So is Dean thinking, can I value bet thin? Dean might have ace high or king high here. Kaplan keeps showing Dean the best hand. Kaplan is running pretty good. And he had the king deuce, so a pair was good. They're playing some poker now.